He said basically the same thing as he did inside, which makes a lot of sense since nothing has changed since then. I think it did sound natural too, and so did my piece. I end the broadcast and immediately hear Clive again, telling us that he also thinks it went well. I navigate to some data on the screen, showing our altitude and everything else. It's not quite like the screen on a plane that shows you where you are on a 3D map of the world, or what the weather is like at your destination, but it confirms we're already moving at a serious speed, despite the fact it doesn't feel like it. All of a sudden, the visuals on the screen are interrupted by a flashing notification of an incoming broadcast. It's not a live call, just a recorded message. I instantly open it. Zola's face appears.
"Touché, Barkley,"
he hisses. His lips are pressed together as tightly as a snake's do, and I've simply never seen him look so angry.
"I'll admit, I feared you might learn of the drill, but never for a second did I think you could pull this off. And in my mantis, no less."
I feel my heart pounding in my chest.
"It's like this is a game to you,"
Zola continues.
"Getting in my way so many times. You have what I want, and I know you know that. But if you don't bring him straight here once you've had your futile fun on the moon, I know you never will. If you head back for Earth, I'll know he's gone. That's one mistake you won't survive. I'm sorry, Carlo, but you are in the hands of a man whose wisdom leaves a lot to be desired. I can only hope he understands this message. Straight here, Barkley, not back to Earth. You might be playing, but believe, I'm not."
The broadcast ends, automatically resuming my link to Clive. Again, I hear cheers. I see Driver beaming from her chair, too. "Clear and free to the destination," Clive says, the upbeat mood of the moment dripping through his excited tone. I even feel myself smiling. Carlo was right. His presence was enough to keep Zola from stopping us. Zola couldn't have been clearer about what has to happen next. But we'll deal with that when it comes. If intelligence and discussion with our well-positioned allies tells us that our final stop really does have to be the beacon, so be it. What counts most, and always has, is protecting Earth from the wanton destructiveness of this maniac's quest for Theosite. Sure, after this his personal vendetta, we called his reaction. "You're going to want to attach your masks," Clive says. "Our first boost is in 3 minutes, and it could take a minute or two to set in." The Driver is first to grab hers. I turn to Carlo, making sure he can take care of his. He puts it in place and nods appreciatively.
"Thank you for treating me well,"
he says, speaking through a gap in his mask as he holds it up.
"With all Nacho has done to you, I could understand if you did not."
"You're with us now, man," I tell him. "What's gone before has gone before. I think we're going to be counting on you later too, so you can thank us with actions." He nods and leans back. I put my mask in place. "You'll be back with us before the landing," Clive says. "We'll have decelerated by then, so you can move to the outer areas to take in the views. Until then, Godspeed, all of you." "Talk soon," I mumble through my mask. The ticker near the ceiling is at 2 minutes, clearly telling us when the Theosite-driven acceleration boost is going to kick in. My eyes grow hazy as it reaches around 150, and the last number I consciously make out is 142. After that, the mildly chemical-tasting gas in my mask does its work, and all I see is blackness. Chapter 48. When Conlon woke me on the plane back in New Zealand, I felt surprised that almost 6 hours had passed. But this, talk about a whole different level. This time I wasn't even feeling tired, for one thing, after that unusually solid rest. But what's far more incredible, as the increasingly metallic-tasting air in my mask brings me back to consciousness, is what the screen in front of me is saying.
"I think we're here,"
Driver says, stretching to life at the other side of our wide circle. I glance at Carlo and am pleased to see his eyes opening too. Leica is still out, but that was part of the plan. "You are indeed," Clive excitedly relays around 6 or 7 seconds later. "The enrichment worked perfectly, and your final boosted deceleration has passed without incident. Touchdown is in 6 minutes. I think our signals are being bounced off a satellite or two, but the communications delay shouldn't be more than a few seconds. That's a few seconds each way, obviously, so nothing that's going to be a problem for discussing things with Earth, but still enough to make natural back-and-forth conversation difficult. You're also cleared to leave the chamber, Clive goes on. Your landing sequence is well underway. Driver unclips her safety restraints without delay. We wouldn't have felt any shaking around, but the fact that Laika is laying exactly where he was inside his cage hints that there hasn't been any. I look at the screen in front of me more carefully. It says we've been traveling for just over 21 hours, and that our landing target is locked. This chamber is obviously several steps down from the suspended animation capsule Zola has planned to use for his chosen few's much longer voyage to Basin 108B, but my experience has still been remarkably smooth. Aside from a little bit of grogginess that's probably down to dehydration as much as anything else, I feel like the past 21 hours haven't happened. Any news down there? I ask. Are you still in touch with Conlon on the plane? Clive comes back pretty quickly.
Eva and Joe are doing great with the others.
And no, not much news from down here, but the team on the Vita has managed to decode encrypted communications between Zola and his crew on the Balena. Immediately after you guys took off, even before his message back to you, he gave an explicit order for them to let you pass. He told them to let Carlo. Now that my hands are free and I can move, I pat Carlo on the thigh. Good call, man, I say. And it really was a good call. This revelation that Zola told the Balena not to shoot us down makes it feel all too likely that they would have if he didn't know Carlo was here. It really seemed like there was no way around the fact that I had to come on this mission with Carlo at my side, but I think our risk has just been vindicated. Be careful of standing up too quickly, Clive warns. But his words arrive a little too late for Driver. She stumbles and catches herself on the next chair.
Oh, he wasn't kidding.
She laughs, seeing the funny side. For the moment, it's easy to see the funny side of things, with the almost intoxicating level of relief we're all feeling.
We'll also want to be seated for the landing, Clive goes on. Even if it's in the primary cockpit, just go carefully.
Driver steadies herself and claps her hands together.
You had me a cockpit. You guys coming? I will stay until we are stationary,
Carlo replies. I can understand that, but I didn't come all this way to miss out on the view. Only 5 more minutes, I tell him, slowly getting to my feet. You're doing great. He leans back again and closes his eyes, as though we haven't all just had enough sleep for the day. Driver and I then walk forward, feeling a very real sensation of movement as soon as we exit the protective chamber's heavy door. The broader atmosphere inside the Mantis still feels remarkably comfortable and natural, confirming all over again that Zola Corps' breakthroughs in artificial gravity and air management really are up there with the most impressive feats the company's vast army of brilliant minds have come up with. It's such a tragedy that the figurehead and beneficiary of all their work is the man least suited to holding so much power.
Imagine what it must have been like out here when we were really moving, she says. Do you think our brains would have exploded? Or would our eyes go first?
She balls her hands together near her eyes, then quickly fires them open into outward-facing palms, complete with a popping noise. Your brain wouldn't take long, I say, responding to her gross-out gestures with a joke and holding my thumb and index finger half an inch apart. We both laugh. When I said an overwhelming sense of relief was behind my semi-intoxicated feeling, I guess I was forgetting that the various gases our friends in New Zealand have been pumping into our airways since we left probably have something to do with it. Either way, we're in good spirits as we carefully step through the passageway to the Mantis's primary cockpit.
Wow,
Driver says, and so do I. The big difference is that while she's awed by the dashboard full of instruments and controls, I'm looking outside. I don't think any human has ever set foot on the dark side of the moon, but then, until a few days ago, I didn't think there was anything here at all. There's no guarantee our intelligence from Phil in the compound is correct about the drill and dome having been robotically assembled. I know he wasn't lying, I just don't know if there might have been landings even he doesn't know about. It's grown increasingly apparent that Zola Corps operates on a strict need-to-know basis, with everyone being told enough to carry out their own work, no more. Thanks to the incredibly powerful lights shining down from the Mantis and our proximity to the landing site, we're now at altitude rather than distance, I can see the dome. It's not colossal, it's not a complex structure, but given where it is and how furtively it's been constructed here, I'm almost as begrudgingly impressed by this as I was when I first laid eyes on footage of the Balena. There it is, I tell Driver. She looks up and stares open-mouthed at our target.
Holy shit, she gawps. It's one thing knowing it's here.
I know, I say, and that's all. We sit down in two of the cockpit's 3 seats and remain fixated on the dome as it gets closer and closer. The rest of the ride is fairly smooth without being gentle. The Mantis really comes into its own when the landing gear automatically deploys. All good, Clive roars happily through the headsets. Mass applause echoes from all around him. I can picture the scene in the mission control area, and I wish I could high-five everyone who played a part in getting us here. We haven't touched down yet, but that's clearly a formality now that the landing gear has deployed as planned.
Strap in and hold on to your seats, mates, Clive advises. The legs will absorb the shock, but you might feel it.
When the moment of truth comes, there's no might about it. I feel it. The landing rattles my seat like someone is shaking it from behind. The sensation doesn't last long, and it didn't hurt anyway, but I'm glad Carlo made the call to stay in the chamber. There's nothing to provide a scale, and I already know how small the dome is from the schematics I briefly glanced at in New Zealand. Despite all that, though, it looks incongruously small on the vast and otherwise completely untouched lunar surface. It's hard to believe it can house a drill capable of doing so much damage. As shown by Zola himself, though, who is anything but a tall man, having been one of 2 surviving premature quadruplets. Sometimes it's about the size of the fight in the dog, rather than the size of the dog in the fight. Hold on, Clive suddenly interjects. We glance at each other. I don't like that tone.
Driver,
he goes on.
Tell me you remember to pack your spacesuit.
My reaction is on pause until I see her eyes rolling. Clive laughs a few seconds later. Don't do that to me, man, I chuckle.
Sorry.
Clive laughs again.
But seriously, you made it. The rover is going to be ready when you are, Driver. Everything you need is inside. Good luck.
Driver leans back and exhales sharply. Are you ready for this? I ask. Staring straight at the dome with an intense look in her eyes, she nods strongly and replies,
Ray, I was born for this.
Chapter 49. I'm not going outside. If my childhood self had known I was going to be on the moon, with a chance to step outside and would decide not to, I think he would have dedicated every second of his life to inventing a time machine so he could jump forward and slap my present moment self in the face. But unlike coming this far, going any further just isn't necessary. Driver knows what she has to do, and I can help just as much by offering input while I watch her visual feed as I could from sitting beside her in the rover. If something goes wrong when she disarms the drill, which is naturally the last thing I want to talk about, it makes no sense for us both to be out there. If I was alone in the world, I would go with her out of solidarity, even if there was no tangible benefit to her mission. But when I'm not alone, when Eva and Joe are awaiting my safe return in New Zealand, I can't be so irresponsible. I have a strong feeling Driver would flat out refuse to let me join her anyway.
Could you help me with my suit?
She asks.
That's all I need from you. I still have my lenses, and they're going to be hooked up to the screen. I only have a few steps to follow. I don't want you to sit here worrying, Ray. This is the safest part.
Well, that settles it. She doesn't want me to go. We walk through the guts of the Mantis, towards the hold where Driver knows her suit has been placed. We pass the central protective chamber as we go, and when I peek in through the door, I see Carlo carefully getting to his feet. Feeling okay? I ask him.
Tired?
He says, shrugging to indicate again that he's surprised not to be feeling a whole lot worse.
Some water and the bathroom may help. Chemical toilets to the left of the cockpit.
Driver calls without slowing down.
Water is in the hold. I'll bring you some.
We continue forward and reach the hold before long. The sight of the EVA suit Driver lifts from a rail brings back all kinds of memories.
I have to wear this, but I should never really be outside, she explains. I'll be in the rover before the bay's airlock opens, and it'll take me right through the dome's outer hatch. I'll seal it back up from the rover before I go through the inner hatch. Once I'm in, I'm in. I definitely wouldn't want to be in there without a suit, but they tell me there's an atmosphere in there. Something to do with the drilling.
More than anything else, I'm just glad to hear she's not going to be walking on the lunar surface. Too much could have gone wrong. The suit is really simple, I tell her, showing her the basics and explaining how the gloves will seal last of all. The microphone and speaker inside your helmet are going to be linked up to the comms console, and there's probably a camera too, but we already have the lenses, like you said. Within a few minutes, she's all set, except for her helmet and gloves. So, what are you going to do in there? I ask, finally pushing for details now that all the seemingly challenging parts of the plan that had to bring us this far have passed without a hitch.
Well, there's a switch, she grins, and I'm going to push it.
I look at her blankly. A switch?
She shrugs. More of a lever, I suppose, kind of like the one outside the bunker in New Zealand. It's an emergency stop for the drill. I'm also going to plant some explosives on the drilling system itself. That's just as important. I'll stop the drill, but only physically taking it out of operation will let us be sure that Zola can't override the stop and reactivate it remotely. There's no generator or tank full of fuel for me to blow up or anything like that. Apparently, the dome soaks up solar power. I always thought the dark side of the moon was dark, but it's just that we don't see it from Earth. It gets the same amount of sunlight.
I like it, I nod. And it's really that straightforward with the hatches and all?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't expect anyone to be here, and I'm going in with their rover. It has the grippers to open the hatch, and it just fits inside. Getting here and getting back are the hard part. Then, whatever comes next.
It's impossible not to admire driver's confidence. So long as it doesn't tip over into complacency, visualizing success as a foregone conclusion is no bad thing.
Ray, the bird is stirring,
I hear Carlo say. I rush back to the chamber and see that he's right. I quickly lift Laika out of his cage and gently remove his protective swaddle. I sit down, resting him in the nook of my arm. Hey, buddy, I smile. You okay? He makes an unusual guttural sound as his eyes come back to life.
Laika needs sleep,
he grumbles.
No, you don't,
Driver chimes in from a standing position behind me.
You're supposed to be awake for a little while before we have to go back, little dude. You'll be sleeping for a long time again. You can stretch your wings in here when I'm gone.
Luna, go? He asks.
I'll be right back,
she promises.
Ray will be here with you all the time.
I help him move himself upright. Luna, suit, he says, noticing her highly unusual attire. Here, Nacho, home? Luna, stop. Nacho? Driver smiles at the ever-perceptive macaw.
This isn't Nacho's home, but I am going to stop his drill,
she says. Then, go to Nacho, home? He pushes. I put a gentle hand on his wing. One thing at a time, buddy, okay? This is what we're here for. He doesn't reply. I place him down on the floor, knowing that he usually likes to walk a little before flying, after a long sleep, or even just a long time in his travel cage.
See you soon,
Driver says, before turning to the door. No goodbye? I call after her.
See you later,
she replies without stopping.
How's that?
I put my headset back on and check we're still in contact with the others. Clive is there almost right away, assuring me that Driver practiced disembarking and piloting the rover back in New Zealand. That gives me confidence. I don't think there's a vehicle in the world she couldn't get the hang of pretty quickly, but the disembarking process could have been a stumbling block. A few seconds later, my screen changes to let me know there's an active EVA suit I can link up to. Driver must have put her helmet on. I tap the button to connect. Hey, I say. Helmet okay?
And gloves,
she confirms.
I'm just getting into the rover.
I watch as she does. I didn't get a great view of the vehicle, since she was already very close when the visual feed started coming in, but what I did see looked pretty much like I would have expected it to. Are you still picking us up, Clive? I ask. Sure am, he replies after a few seconds. The gap is short, but it's always tense. Carlo is back in his seat beside me, and Laika has flown up to rest by my shoulder so he can see what's on the screen too. We all watch on, as Driver successfully opens the rover bay's hatch. It's completely sealed off from the rest of the Mantis, naturally, and she's going to leave the ramp out with the hatch open so she can return easily when her job out there is done.
What should I say when I first go out?
She muses.
It's not really a step. Actually, never mind. I got it.
I watch silently as she rolls down the ramp. The feed is coming from her helmet rather than the lenses, which must be an option I could access somewhere, but this is more than good enough. If anything, it gives us a clearer view, since the helmet's visor isn't in the way.
Here I go, Driver says. One small tap on the gas, one big boot up Zola's ass.
It's impossible not to laugh. Clive does too.
This should only take 4 minutes, she goes on. Can you see much, Ray? My headlights are bright, and the mantis is still shining on the dome, but can you see it all okay?
All of it, I confirm. 4 minutes later, like clockwork, she's at the dome. Now I can really see it. It looks pretty imposing up close, despite being a lot smaller than the undersea structure we entered from the Nautilus. Driver stops right in front of a very familiar-looking access hatch. The difference this time is that she has to use the rover's extendable grippers to open it. Did you practice this? I ask. In lieu of a reply, she takes control of the grippers and proceeds to make it look like the easiest thing in the world.
She did,
Clive says.
You couldn't let him think I'm a natural?
Driver laughs. In many ways, she is. And much more importantly, she's in. Chapter 50. Once Driver has opened the hatch on the outside of Zola Corps' remarkable lunar dome, she continues forward in the rover. It really does look like a tight squeeze, which for the first time brings her skilled control to the fore. There's another sealed hatch beyond the first. It looks to be on a flat door rather than a dome, indicating the inner part might not be domed. We'll see more when Driver is all the way inside and steps out of the rover. For the moment, it's restricting what we can see from here. In the bay-like buffer zone between the hatches, Driver deftly maneuvers the rover so it's facing outwards again. She then re-engages the grippers, to which the hatch turns out to be highly magnetized, and reseals the outer dome. It crosses my mind that if she has any problem getting out, I'll have to go out on foot. It's one of those worst-case thoughts that I don't really think is going to come true, like when I was momentarily petrified that Carlo might sell us out during the live broadcast to Zola when we took off from New Zealand. I'm not normally prone to that kind of catastrophically minded overthinking, but the past week would do it to anyone. The final hatch in front of Driver is operable by hand. After wisely taking a second to confirm with me and our much more distant allies that everything seems fine with her suit, as well as the rover's atmospheric sensors, she steps out. She lifts a briefcase-like box from her rover and places it on the floor. Driver might be on a floor rather than the ground, but she's sure as hell still walking on the moon. I'm beyond proud of her, and hope more than anything this is going to be a story she can tell her grandkids someday.
Here we go,
she says, grabbing hold of the wheel on a heavy seal that looks functionally identical to the one she opened at the end of the Nautilus's extendable passageway. It takes her a few seconds to quite literally get to grips with the glove-to-metal operation, which is more than understandable. But like she always has so far, she gets it done. And now, briefcase back in hand, she's really in. As she's been instructed to do, Driver reseals the entrance as quickly as she can.
Whoa, it's so different in here,
she immediately says.
I feel heavy again, like at home. Out there between the hatches, it was kind of halfway.
Zola Corps engineering strikes again. There's clearly a lot going on in this inner structure, likely to aid the drilling process and any in-person maintenance that might ever have been required. The substantialness of the drilling rig is the first thing I notice. Given the power and depth it can achieve, I shouldn't have expected anything else, but we're on the moon, and Zola set this up without anyone noticing. If I wasn't here on the moon to know how real this is, there's no way I could truly believe it. Driver looks all around, taking everything in. She moves slowly along the roof and walls, clearly cognizant of all of us who are watching.
Square internal structure, like we thought, she says. And the drill is going. I can feel the vibration from here.
We've arrived in plenty of time, relatively speaking. We're still around 20 hours from when the drill is set to reach the critical disruption point. That's the time when it would be too late to prevent massive physical damage to the moon itself, with the cascading effect of reaching ever-richer theosite deposits calculated as being forceful enough to result in a planetary catastrophe. Things would only get even worse, even faster, if the drill kept going at that point, but we're already most of the way from stopping it. We must be 99% of the way there, I figure, with how confident Driver sounded about this final disarming process. When she turns to complete her full circle of the room, the all-important lever comes into view. Stopping the drill will enable her to get close enough to plant a timed explosive on it to ensure Zola can never remotely reactivate it. It's a solid plan. I'd like to see this drill fully destroyed and the excavated area carefully protected, but that's for another day. We're just here to stop things from getting worse.
Pulling the lever in 10,
she announces, beginning a countdown. Clive chimes in at 5 to give the okay. On 1, driver reaches out and grabs the lever. She actually has to push it up rather than pull it down, but it doesn't look like she has to put her full strength into it. While she's still facing the wall, and before we can see anything, she immediately calls out,
"It stopped! The vibration has stopped!"
"Go easy," I say. "And hey, driver, reopen the hatch before you activate the explosive, okay? Set it up now, but don't activate until you open the hatch. You don't want to be grasping around at that while the clock ticks. Then close the hatch again when you're out."
"Already in the plan, but thanks for the call out,"
she replies. She then opens the briefcase she placed on the floor and lifts out some familiar-looking explosives. They have served us well so far. The ones she reaches for are at the strong end of the spectrum, way beyond any I've used. In the undersea structure, I had to be careful not to destroy the fuel tank located dangerously close to my target. The driver has no such worry here, where stronger is better. She walks over to the drilling rig, which looks increasingly impressive up close, and wastes no time attaching 3 explosives. She's very deliberate about where they go, reassuring me this was all carefully planned during the mission's final preparation stages, while I was in the plane with Joe and Eva. When they're in place, driver hurries back to the hatch and opens it. She's walking quickly rather than running, but clearly keen to get out of there and back to the safety of the rover. While she's at her briefcase, she lifts out a device that looks like a camera and leaves it on the ground facing the drill. Smart. This will give us a visual confirmation of the explosion when she's safely out of range.
"I'm going to do 90 seconds,
she says, walking over to the drill one last time. She taps each of the waiting explosives 3 times and hightails it for the hatch. This time she is sprinting. She retreats to the rover and hurriedly uses it to open the outer hatch, getting all the way out long before 90 seconds comes.
"Our system status down here has updated to show that the drill is deactivated,"
Clive tells us from New Zealand, where we first saw that it was active.
"Great work already. I'll let you know if this knocks it offline."
Driver uses the rover to close the hatch behind her, still before we reach the moment of truth. She drives away like the whole dome could blow at any second. I'm all in favor of erring on the side of caution. I watch and count, watch and count, watch and count. After a while, I know the explosion should occur any time now.
"Offline!"
Clive yells excitedly.
"And yes, we have a visual of the detonation. It killed the camera on the other side of the structure, but the first few freeze frames are clear. It's done. Driver, you destroyed it." "We destroyed it,"
she says. However confident Driver was about this going so well, and however much I believed in her, I feel this victory deeply. Getting here when we did was the real odds-defying part, more than earning the Starshot moniker of the grander operation this Mantis craft was built for. I moved to the cockpit to watch Driver's return journey with my own eyes, instead of from her perspective. Laika perches on my shoulder to come along, and even Carlo wants to join us when I suggest it. I know we're unlikely to have any chance to rest on our laurels or bask in this win, but I try to push all of that away for now and just take this moment in. Driver is moving at a fair rate outside. As she goes, the sight of her headlights cutting through the lunar darkness really is something to behold. Just like life, where there's light, there's hope. And despite everything Zola has thrown at us, from the station to the ocean to the dark side of the damn moon, we're still here. Our light isn't out just yet. Chapter 51.
"It is incredible,"
Carlos says from the chair next to mine in the cockpit.
"Nacho created Zolacor from nothing, and everything you see came from this one vision to take humanity to the stars. Somewhere along the way, his mind became poisoned. There is no greater tragedy."
And he's right. The Mantis, the rover, the dome, the drill, all of it was created by Zola's company. Obviously, I never knew quite how advanced his secret projects were, but his unrelenting investment in space technologies and unquenchable thirst for progress were two of the reasons I used to look up to him. I feel like an idiot for how I used to feel about Zola. I honestly can't even begin to imagine how Carlo has been feeling since we brought his understanding of the world crumbling to the ground when we showed him the truth of what Zola has done. I don't think it's a case of his mind being corrupted in adulthood, though. I think Zola has been the same man on the inside since before he achieved his first major success, and the power he has since amassed simply enabled him to show the world what he was all along, broken and bitter. Driver reaches the cargo bay's ramp in a matter of minutes, and is back inside with us just a few more after that. Laika, Carlo, and I are waiting when she steps back into the main body of the Mantis, already unsuited.
Excellent work,
Carlo says, beating me to the punch. He leans forward and hugs her, showing more outward team spirit than he has at any point so far.
Thanks, dude,
she replies. Luna, win! Laika squawks. Luna, do good! We all laugh at that. Luna, do great, I grin warmly.
That's Driver to you, Barkley,
she chides with a wink, setting off back towards our chamber with no further ceremony. Either way, with that lunar drive she just pulled off, she really was aptly named for this mission. We all follow her to the chamber. She takes my seat, in front of the screen, and rubs her hands together as if warming them up. I guess the interior material of her gloves was cold. I can't say I noticed anything like that on the station, but there was so much adrenaline running through my veins that I wouldn't count on having noticed if they were made of ice.
We have 2 routes pre-programmed, she says. One to New Zealand, one to the Beacon. Theosite reserves are still good, so we're not going to need to refill the enrichment tank with the extra stock.
We brought extra theosite? I ask. I guess I stopped paying attention when I was assured we had enough, and took a look at the loaded quantity to see for myself.
Yeah, they sent it all, in case they had to use more than we expected during the journey, but they obviously didn't. I guess now is when we start thinking about what happens next, right?
I gulp and take the seat next to her. She's right. With this done, what we've pushed aside as a concern for later can no longer be ignored.
Wait, why is the link to New Zealand offline?
She asks, pointing to an alarming red X in the corner of the screen.
Did I maybe not disable my helmet or something? Are we still linked to that?
It can't be that. I was talking to you and Clive at the same time, I tell her, frantically tapping on the screen to try to reactivate something.
Maybe it terminated both links when I powered down the helmet?
She shrugs, eyeing me with less concern than I'm feeling.
He'll come back. Ah, there.
Carlo sighs in relief. We both look back down, but the last thing I feel is relief. There is an incoming broadcast, but it's not from New Zealand. It's not from Earth at all, and it's not from the Vita. The designation code tells me enough even before we hit play. ZCTB. Zolacor, the Beacon. Carlo, this isn't our people, I gulp. It's Zola. Driver's hands both shoot to her face, tightly pressed around her nose and mouth in a praying gesture. I lean forward and force myself to hit play. And there it is.
I thought you were smart, Ray,
Zola begins, taunting me with the same opening line he used when we were in New Zealand.
But it turns out even I can be wrong from time to time.
Chapter 52.
You really thought you could do it, didn't you?
Ignacio Zola sighs, shaking his head in mock disappointment.
You really thought you could make a hostage of someone so dear to me and get away with it?
Driver takes one hand away from her face and rests it on top of mine.
We didn't think he would do nothing,
she whispers during one of his trademark gaps between sentences. I appreciate the attempt to calm my runaway fears, especially when she's evidently so concerned in her own right, but it doesn't go far. The look in Zola's eyes is very different to the one we saw in the last few broadcasts. He looks as vindictively driven as he did when he first woke up on the Beacon and sent the message to Colorado about wanting to break me before he kills me. Bitterly, he continues.
But the thing that disappoints me most is that you've all seemed to think all along that I haven't rigged my own bunker and underground space research facility with emergency explosives. Ray, what kind of man would I be to risk leaving a loose end like that? I'm almost offended.
I feel Driver's hand tighten. It doesn't feel like she's trying to reassure me anymore. We're as utterly shaken as each other by what this scumbag is telling us.
I only planned to leave New Zealand online until you left with Carlo,
Zola goes on.
when its usefulness would have expired. You forced a slight delay with all this nonsense, since I had to make sure the support team of traitors you put together got him through that insane journey in one piece. I hired the best people, so I had faith in their work even after they showed such weakness of character to join your futile crusade. And they did keep Carlo alive, which I'm glad of, but that means their usefulness has expired. I know the Mantis has a preset course for the beacon. That is my craft you've stolen, in case you're forgetting. I hear it's radio communications. You don't need New Zealand anymore, and I don't either.
Every sentence makes it worse. Somehow, some way, it just keeps getting worse. His evil gaze narrows.
I knew my leverage would be wasted before you dealt with the drill, Ray. I just get so myopic. And okay, you destroyed my drill. I'll install a new one. The theosite is still there. But as for now, when my leverage can have more effect, well, why don't I show instead of tell? This was a few minutes ago. Oh, and by way of explanation, I have a stock of defensive drones around the perimeter of my highest priority research and development site. Who would have thought?
Zola's face disappears, replaced by a video feed. The camera rises high into the sky, bringing the compound's parking lot into view. I feel like a weight is crushing my shoulders from above, compressing my body like a vice. The drone veers away from the compound towards the highway. It moves at incredible speed and high altitude until suddenly dipping and banking to one side as its target comes into view. Driver stands up in a single movement and turns away, sobbing already. I can't even cry. All I can do is stare helplessly as the drone locks on and fires at its target, Joe and Eva's plane. Chapter 53. Zola's face returns to the screen, smiling maniacally. A few seconds later, the video returns and shows the drone-based camera jerk rapidly before stabilizing again to show a projectile landing just to the right of the plane. It hovers in place, locking on again.
The two people you care about most, at the mercy of the one you detest more than any other,
Zola says.
Maybe now you know how I've been feeling since you kidnapped Carlo?
Like a cat with a mouse, he's toying with me. The total desolation of a few seconds ago, when it looked like he was blowing up the plane right then, is gone. There's no time for relief, though. Not with the gut-churning knowledge that he could do so at any second. With this broadcast not being live, he might have even done so already. The drone's visual target lock then disappears, moments before it fires two more projectiles just to the side.
I'm not going to kill them there, Ray, he says. I'm only, what should we call it, terrorizing them. You see, I want to scare them into the bunker. It'll take as long as it takes. I'll bring a drone out, fire all around, leave, wait a while, and repeat. What would you guess? 3 cycles? 4? It won't be long. It's just so much easier for me if everyone is in one place. I've already blocked all communications signals in that area too, in case you're still thinking I'm a man who misses the obvious. That means they can't contact anyone. But since all your communications went through the facility, it means you can't either. All you have is what I tell you, what I show you.
Driver, facing the screen again, is now shaking with rage rather than sobbing. She sits down.
Bring me, Carlo,
Zola demands. He says nothing else for almost 10 seconds, far beyond any of his usual emphatic pauses.
I'm tired of the runaround, Ray. This ends where it started, right here, face to face, man to man. It ends Here.
The broadcast fades to black. As it does, it feels like my hopes of ever seeing Eva and Joe again, faint as they were, fade with it. Chapter 54.
We can get there.
Driver insists, standing up again and pacing a frantic circle around the screen.
Just like we knew we could get here, and then worry about later when it came. We can get there, Ray. We can think of something to fix this when we're there. There's one of him, and there are 3 of us. 4 with Leica. He trusts Carlo like a brother, and he's not going to think Leica will be so motivated and able to help us. I'm not saying we'll all survive it, but if we can all get inside, we can come up with some kind of distraction to take him out and disarm the bombs, or shut down his system, or even ask the Vita to just blow us to hell and take him out with us. Whatever it takes.
I have to admire Driver's tenacity, and especially the genuinely expressed willingness to lay down her life that she threw in at the end, like it's something anyone would say. But tenacity isn't enough anymore. This time it's different. We've just stopped what we thought was Zola's final big move, only for him to pull another rabbit out of his hat. The planetary threat from the drill is gone, but my world, my family, is in Zola's grasp more tightly than ever. I'm also not even sure about the other half of what she said.
How can we even get there?
I ask. He seems to think we can too, just because a course is set. What about the chamber to protect us from the forces of the boosts? The gases, they told us, are an important part of stabilizing our vitals.
It's all set,
she insists.
Remember, no one woke us up. It was all programmed to get us here safely, and it's all programmed for the way back too. Tell him, Carlo.
The old man says nothing for a few seconds. He's shaken by what we've just seen and heard. He did stay behind in New Zealand in the first place because he didn't want the non-evacuated bunker dwellers to be left behind for good after all. Unlike the man who has employed him for so long, he does have a heart.
Carlo,
Driver repeats, snapping her fingers.
You were there when Clive talked us through it. Tell Ray we can get back.
Eventually, he forces a slow, weak nod.
She is right.
Driver holds my eyes.
See? Our 2 course options are set, and the boosts and gases are set for each of them. The only difference is we need to initiate the launch. The rest is the same. We'll dock with the station instead of landing. This craft is literally built for that. The team at Mission Control didn't give us pre-programmed return courses for no reason, Ray. They knew something could go wrong, either in New Zealand, or with our communication, or with Zola doing something with his signal blocking tech. We can get there.
And then what? I ask. It's a serious question, not intended as dismissive. Driver sits down.
Okay, so we're thinking. Good, let's think. He wants Carlo, okay? We know that. So we give him Carlo. Maybe Carlo has a weapon. Maybe Carlo leads Zola into a room and locks the door. Maybe Carlo has Leica tucked into the back of his shirt.
Nacho, kill Leroy. Now Nacho want to hurt Jojo,
Leica says, taking the mention of his name as an invitation to join the conversation.
Leica want to help kill Nacho.
No one says anything. Leica is standing on the floor looking up at us. For all the time I've spent with him lately, I still don't know much about regular macaws. I don't know if they bear grudges like this, let alone think in terms of premeditated violent revenge. I don't doubt his sincerity of feeling for a second, though. And if we do have a trump card here, I feel like he's as likely a candidate as Carlo.
Nacho would overpower me if I tried to lock him in a room,
Carlo says, breaking the short silence.
The same. If he sensed I had a weapon, I lack the speed, the strength, and friends, to be truthful, he cannot be sure I would not lack the ability to strike in anger. The plan cannot count on me like that.
I'm not overly surprised by that, given Carlo's general demeanor. He doesn't seem like someone who would have it in him to kill someone. I would have said the same about myself until recently. That has changed, even if Carlo's hesitation hasn't. I'm glad he said it, though. It's better to know what isn't going to work now, when we can score it off our list of options, rather than in the heat of battle when one slip-up could be fatal. We're definitely not broadcasting now, right? I ask. Like, there's no way Zola can have an active link when this comms light isn't on? Driver hesitates for a second before shaking her head.
No and no. But I mean, I don't know. We have to make a plan.
I can see that she's worrying about it now, though. The uncharacteristic stuttering is one thing, but her expression is the real tell.
She is right.
Carlo says.
We do have to make a plan. If Nacho is listening, he could be watching too. If so, there is no code or signal he would not see. You cannot think like that. There is no reason to think he could override the communications system. If he could, why did you have to hit play on his last broadcast? He would have forced it.
Carlo, true.
Leica squawks.
No play like game, Ray Ray.
I didn't ask, and we're way past thinking Carlo harbors any kind of loyalty to Zola, but I can never be anything but grateful for the little guy trying to help. Thanks, buddy, I tell him. I know. Carlo is our friend. Carlo wants to stop Nacho, too. Carlo sighs heavily.
I want to protect the boys. They cannot be forgotten in this. The Balena cannot be forgotten. It won't be,
Driver says.
We can somehow take Zola out. What's left of Earth's forces and the leaders on the Vita will negotiate a surrender and force it if they have to. You can count on that. The Balena itself is priceless. With how much damage he's done to Earth, a habitable generation ship like that isn't something they're going to destroy out of spite. The commander of the Vita said that himself.
Major said that? I cut in. For real? She nods.
And you heard Clive say that the Vita team has decoded messages between Zola and the Balena. They're going to know who's in charge and how to talk to them when the time comes. We know the other bunkers can defend themselves, so there's not a lot the Balena could threaten. With Zola dead and not enough theosite to go far, surrender would be their only way out.
It's my turn to sigh. Maybe, but it's that whole with Zola dead part I'm stuck on. For starters, I don't know how we'd do it, but we also know he's the kind of guy who will have a dead man switch. If he dies, all the bombs in New Zealand and his missiles targeting the bunkers are probably going to be set to blow. Even if the ERF bunkers can defend themselves, New Zealand can't. That's why we need to get into his systems. If we can disarm him and take him alive, making sure he can't touch anything or trigger a tripwire, access to the control center's systems or maybe some other systems in his own weird room could be what we need.
Could we do anything with these tranquilizing gases?
Driver asks, looking at the masks attached to every chair.
Weaponize them somehow?
I shake my head. If this was a movie, I'm sure we'd find a way. But while there are no bad ideas in the brainstorming search for something workable, that's not a good one.
I fear he will call me in alone,
Carlo says. This is the real sticking point because I think Carlo is right. All of a sudden, Driver sits down next to him. Her face is filled with a new focus.
Carlo, if he does, would you be willing to activate a timed explosive to distract him and give us a chance to rush in? It could be one of the weak ones, and you could be far enough away to avoid getting hurt. You could pretend to be scared to distract him even more. All we need to do is get in and we'll have a chance. He's on his own. He can't be in multiple places at once.
I like it. It's not perfect and it's not fleshed out, but I like it. Carlo doesn't answer. It's not a yes, but I think the fact he doesn't say no right away says a lot.
I'll get everything we might need from the hold,
Driver says, clearly thinking the same thing.
Not just for that, but for anything. We definitely can't count on having time to go back there for anything once we dock. You know how he likes his deadlines.
When Driver leaves, Carlo keeps looking at the floor. Your boys will be brought back to Earth and taken care of properly, I insist. There's no longer any prospect of you and Zola joining them for this mission to a new world, Carlo. That's over. Their best chance now is for us to take Zola down and make sure they get home. I know without a shadow of a doubt that the safety of those boys is Carlo's hang-up. The whole business with the Valerio Institute is extremely unsettling, and possibly worse than we've realized yet, but it's what this old man, this used and confused old man, cares about most.
I will do what I have to do to distract him,
Carlo eventually says. Whatever it takes, I push. He gulps, closing his eyes as he does it, then exhales more forcefully than usual.
For the boys, whatever it takes.
Chapter 55. The driver returns fairly quickly with some supplies and places them on the floor behind one of the chairs. Is Leica's second thing of stuff there? I ask, measured out. She nods without answering out loud, understanding I didn't want to mention it yet.
Leica sleep?
He asks. Oh well, I guess I should have known better than to think I could talk around him with a euphemism. We're all going to sleep, buddy, I tell him, and you'll sleep just as long as last time. It's the same dose. Even more dutiful than usual, he hops over towards his cage.
Not quite yet,
Driver says. We know we might not have any chance to discuss anything when we dock, so we show Carlo how to place and activate the timed explosives. If Zola does call him in alone, they could provide the best and possibly only real chance we have of causing a sufficient distraction to allow Driver and I to sneak in. In short, it's extremely important. If this is what we end up having to go with, there's a hint of irony in using a fog of war kind of approach against Zola. After all, that was the name he used for the strategy that played a central part in his own plan for the initial and motherlode detonations. Particularly if Carlo can plant and time multiple explosions, Zola could be rattled by the uncertainty of what might happen next. Depending on where he's situated, Carlo could even effectively block his path to the crucial areas of the station. Before long, Carlo has gotten to grips with the basics of the explosives. They really are foolproof, but Carlo is no fool in any case. He might be incredibly misguided on some things, but he is no fool. Next up, Driver drills him on how to act scared in a way that will be as helpful as possible for our purposes. That mainly involves making sure Zola is facing away from any doors, she says. Faking heart palpitations, or other physical symptoms certainly wouldn't hurt either. If it comes down to hoping Carlo can disarm anything on the systems in the control room or Zola's lair, I won't be holding out much hope. I still make sure he's as clear as he can be on the relative locations of those parts of the station, though, because just as is the case with our situation in general, any chance is better than none. Driver pays a lot of close attention when I physically draw a map. I do so using the old-school methods provided by the supplies she brought from the hold. Sometimes, when efficiency and clarity is all that counts, you can't beat the classic approach of paper and pencils. I skip over a lot of detail, leaving rooms unmarked unless they're likely to be important. The control center and Zola's room are our two focal points. Everything else exists in relation to them. This map will still be here when we arrive, and they can both look at it then. That's why most of our energy goes into talking Carlo through more of the actions he might need to take. The one thing we know is that he's the only person who is definitely going to be called in. It's unlikely Carlo will ever be separated from Zola, at least after making his initial entry. That's why our core plan is for him to keep Zola distracted long enough for the two of us, and ideally Leica, to rush in. Leica could be one hell of a distraction in all kinds of ways, but our most realistic chance will come if Driver and I can split up between the two priority rooms to try to disarm Zola's systems. Depending on where Zola chooses to meet Carlo, it might end up only being possible for us to reach one of those rooms. In that case, one of us would head there, and the other could work on an ambush that would take Zola down, but not all the way out. That could give us time to call to the Vita and our bunkers for further assistance. There are far more unknowns than knowns. But if Zola holds off on activating his pre-planted bombs as a means of maintaining leverage to ensure I hand over Carlo unharmed, and if we can distract or restrain him almost immediately, I really think there is a non-zero chance we could pull this off. It's a small chance for sure, but it's there. It's a chance. My biggest hope for the moment is that Zola meant it when he said we'll be face to face. If I really can get that close, I'd fancy my chances to hook his arms and take him down before he can do anything. I can't help but think he'd know that too, though, so he's bound to have something preventing me from getting so close. Even then, I would fancy myself to distract him for long enough to enable Driver to sneak around. Because Zola has said so many times that he wants to break me, I don't think he'll want to rush into whatever he's planning without slowly twisting the knife into my heart. We might, just might, be able to take advantage of his darkness. One thing I warned both Driver and Carlo about very explicitly is that the station is a dangerous place. and that Zola might well have laced it with traps like the falling barrier that almost killed me in one of the walkways. I tell them to be deliberate in their movements, always keeping the target destination in mind, whatever it may be in each moment, and never pausing for too long. One thing we don't have, unfortunately, is an extra pair of contact lenses for Carlo. While I've never had to rely on it, Isaac told me they have a built-in hazard detection and warning feature, which is operational by default, even when other smart features are disabled. The user can disable the feature too, he said, but there's no good reason to, since it's unobtrusive and only highlights potential threats that meet a high threshold. The lenses are supposed to highlight things like lasers and smoke when the highly intelligent sensors think they could be signaling danger effectively. As I think about it, I don't think Carlo would have much call for them anyway. Zola isn't going to lead Carlo anywhere dangerous, I figure, and certainly nowhere that's been booby-trapped. But if Driver and I are able to seize a chance to step on the station, I'll be glad to have the lenses on our side. We talk over a few more eventualities before we all feel as ready as we could be. That's a long way from as ready as I'd like to be, but we are where we are, with no contact with anyone and no real sense of what Zola is going to request of us when we arrive. I think we've done well to come up with anything. Storming his castle isn't going to be easy, and I can't even take for granted that it will be possible, but we'll give it all we've got. Always worried that something might go wrong, I have to fight to keep my hands steady as I tranquilize little Laika one more time. Good boy, I tell him, as the syringe goes in. He really is.
Laika, okay,
he assures me. And that's him all over, more concerned about me knowing he's okay than he is about himself. Driver helps me to swaddle him, replicating the way the helpful Zolacor worker did it for us earlier. We then place him in the cage, still tightly hooked to the walls and floor, and secure him in place.
Now I just need to initiate a launch for the beacon option of our 2 return courses, and then we're set.
Driver says.
You guys should strap in and put your masks and wristbands on. The Mantis got us here without the team having to interfere, so we have to believe we can count on it getting us back. I can't do anything manually from the cockpit anyway. It was rocky enough for the landing, and that was way after the final boosts. There's a reason they put us in this chamber and gave us the gas.
I wouldn't let you stay out there, I insist, let alone ask you to. Just hurry back once you initiate, okay? You need to get yourself strapped and set too. On my left, Carlo gets himself fully prepared for the journey. Straps, wristbands, mask. Ahead of me, Driver pauses at the chamber's open hatch. There's going to be no time to converse about anything when she gets back. We both know that. The next time we talk will be when the Mantis wakes us, after the final deceleration boost as we near the beacon.
This is literally it, Ray, she says. He sent us in circles and detours and kept us grasping at straws, but this is it. One last push, because something has to give.
I taste the gas kicking in before Driver gets back. There's no launch countdown this time, and as I feel my eyes grow heavy, I grow increasingly worried. She sealed the chamber behind her when she left, so I'm not worried about myself. I'm worried about her. Fortunately, one of the last things I see before I fade is the sight of her rushing back in and sealing the hatch again. She sits down beside me and straps in. The very last thing I see is her wristbands and mask going on. Satisfied that she's safe, my heavy eyes feel free to close. The last thing I feel is Driver's hand faintly resting on mine, on the arm of my chair. Her last words echo in my increasingly hazy mind in my final moments of consciousness.
Something has to give.
The words echo because I know she's right. Just like Zola was right when he said the same thing. One way or another, this all ends on the beacon. Chapter 56.
Squire! Ray?
I blink my heavy eyes open, which takes no small effort, and immediately look over at Laika.
Laika want out!
He tells me. I unstrap myself and move my mask, which this time has woken me a little later than Laika's sedative has worn off. Sorry, buddy, I tell him, hurrying to help him out of the protective swaddle. He's not struggling, likely because he understands everything far better than a regular parrot ever could. He also looks tired himself, which fortunately suggests he hasn't been awake for long. I stumble as I get up, catching myself on the chair. Driver and Carlo are stirring, too. We must be close. As soon as Leica is free, I go back to my chair to look at the screen. We are close. Very close. The Mantis is beginning its final approach to the beacon, and I can see on the visualization that it's coming in on what I've always thought of as the north side of the station. There are 2 emergency airlocks there, and it seems like we'll be docking at one of them, like our much smaller craft did at another airlock when we sent Isaac's robot to recover crucial information.
How's it looking?
Driver asks, groaning out the words as she stretches her arms. We made it, I say. So far it's the only thing I know. But then I notice a blinking notification in the bottom left corner of the screen, telling us that a broadcast came in 9 minutes ago. It's from Zola.
I bet that was right after the final theosite-boosted deceleration,
Driver says, leaning in next to me.
He knows we'll have been out cold until at least then.
I hit play. Zola appears on the screen holding some kind of device. It looks to be around the size of a phone, just 4 or 5 times thicker. An antenna sticks out of one side, while Zola's finger is hovering over a button on the top.
Canteen,
He says.
both of you. No games.
The broadcast ends. The canteen is the last place I expected Zola to call anyone. But the good news is that he hasn't called Carlo alone.
Both of you.
The old man muses. Driver and I turn to face him.
He did not say only the 2 of you. He said the both of you. That is both of us, Ray. He may believe we are the only people here. The Mantis flies itself. With no need for a pilot. Why would anyone else have taken the risk? Where's the canteen?
Driver immediately asks. She rushes over to our boxes of supplies to pick up the paper map I drew before we left the moon. I only focused on the rooms I thought would be important, and the canteen certainly wasn't one of them. It's where the dead bodies are, I gulp.
Sick bastard.
She mutters in reply as she reaches the supplies. As soon as she hands me the map and a pencil, I mark the canteen and talk as I annotate some more. Its main entrance faces south, which could give you a chance to sneak west to the control room from our entry point at the north. It depends if Zola is already in the canteen. If he is, he might have a window. The compass directions I'm using have no meaning in a technical sense, obviously, but they're what people have used to describe the station's layout thanks to the ubiquity of top-down maps. It's an efficient way to describe relative positions on my scribbled map, too. The canteen has an internal door and an air vent connecting to the kitchen at the back. I go on. And the kitchen connects to the maintenance bay from below. It's a long way around, but if I can keep him facing the main entrance, it could be a way for you to come in and surprise him from behind. You could listen through the vent to hear what's happening, but I don't know how quietly you could open the door. If you're there and things sound desperate, you could set off an explosive or even just knock stuff around in the kitchen to distract him.
Too many moving parts. I like the control room idea,
She replies. I nod several times. Me too. You really want to try to initiate contact with the Vita or any of our bunkers, or to disable the signal blocking tech around New Zealand to warn everyone to evacuate the compound. With all the doors I've blown off, you should be able to hear us talking. That means you have to be really quiet too.
Definitely,
She says, paying close attention to everything I'm saying. We don't know what we're walking into, I go on, so you can only react to what you hear. If it sounds like I'm keeping him distracted, keep trying to work on the system. If you're locked out or just not getting anywhere, and if it ever sounds like Zola might be going somewhere else, you could try to surprise him from behind a doorway or something like that. Anything that seems like the best option once you hear how things are playing out. I'll be trying to pick a moment to restrain him, and I'll call for you if a chance like that comes. But I didn't like the look of that device in his hand. It looked like a detonator. Driver exhales slowly.
it did.
She admits.
That's why I don't like the idea of an explosive distraction if we have any other option. It could spook him into hitting it, and you can't obviously engage him in a struggle while he's holding that thing. You're just going to play it as you see it too, Ray. And Carlo, try to keep Zola talking, ask about the boys, and maybe say the guys who tried to evacuate you were rough with you. Anything that engages him could give Ray a 1-second window to move. That could be all we need. I understand,
Carlo says.
So, no explosives.
Still take some, I suggest. Zola might send you somewhere on your own. We don't know what he might want from me or what he might try to make me watch. If you're alone and you engage an explosive, that will break his frame. He might worry that you've triggered a security trap or something. His first thought would be you, not the detonator. And if his guard goes down for 1 second, like Driver said, that could give me a chance to grab the device and take him down.
But only if things sound desperate,
Driver tells Carlo, implicitly agreeing with my point. I'm glad she stressed that part, though.
Square! What Leica do?
My feathered friend asks, gazing up at us from the floor.
Leica want to help stop Nacho?
Driver and I share a very pensive glance. She raises her eyebrows, and I know her well enough to know this means she's leaving it up to me. I nod.
You'll come with me.
Driver tells him.
You need to be absolutely silent unless I ask you to speak, okay? Be quiet all the rest of the time. And if I ask you to go somewhere or do something, you do it. You could really help us, little dude, but I need to know you're not going to hurt us. Do you understand how important it is to be quiet?
Leica? No, speak.
He promises. Driver is right on all counts. Leica could really help us. He's fast, he's smart, he's motivated, and he knows the station like the back of his hand. A squawk wouldn't alarm Zola like an explosion would anyway, and I think the benefits Leica can bring outweigh that risk. There's no exact science here, but I feel like we have to play, or at least be ready to play, all the cards we have. Within minutes, the Mantis is docked. We missed this impressive automatic process, being far too busy in here to take it in from the cockpit, but it's done. The visualization on our screen shows that we're connected to the beacon in 4 places by 4 arm-like protrusions that have effectively hooked themselves to inlet connection points on the beacon's north side. A fully sealed, extendable metal passageway, not too unlike the kind we used in the Nautilus, is already in place to lead our side exit door to the beacon's airlock. That lock remains sealed, waiting for us, which tells me Zola is already going to be in the canteen. I don't know that for sure, but I doubt he'll be standing at the threshold. I can't wear an earpiece for the obvious reason that Zola might see it and know someone else is with us. So Driver is going to be counting on her own hearing, and maybe Leica's, to judge what's happening until she feels safe to sneak out towards the control room. A million things can go wrong here, but it feels like a billion could have gone wrong to this point. And many have, for sure, but we're still standing, and when we're face to face, I'll have a chance. Stay back at first until you hear us talking, I tell Driver. If he doesn't think anyone else is on board and he sees you here, he could flip out. He's not expecting anyone else to go in either way, but you have to wait until it feels safe. I wish we had more to base our decisions on than how it feels, but go with your gut. Listen close and go with your gut. And remember, if we take him down, don't kill him. I really think we need an expert team to disarm this place while he's still alive, in case he has a dead man switch set to blow the minute he stops breathing.
100%,
she says firmly.
We want him alive, for now.
Carlo takes a timed explosive from the case and quickly checks that he's correctly remembering the simple steps. When he's confident, he places it in his pocket. Before we head for the door, I crouch down to Leica and press a finger to my lips. We're counting on you, buddy. Be quiet unless Luna tells you to be loud, okay? Signaling his total understanding, he slowly tips his head down and then up in his best attempt at a nod. "Atta boy," I say, gently patting his wing. I stand up and look at Driver.
We've come a long way,
she tells me.
Literally just a few more steps now and he's yours. Don't let anger get the better of you in there. Believe me, he'll be pushing your buttons from the second you get in there. He'll be trying to break you. Keep believing they're going to be okay, whatever he says, just like last time you were up here. Make sure he doesn't push the button in his hand, and they will be okay, Ray. You can do this. We can do this.
Driver leans forward and pats me on the back, halfway to a hug, and with that, I set off. "Oh, Carlo," I say when we reach the lock. "My right hand can't really grip. Could you help with this?" With both of his hands and one of mine, we easily unseal the lock. I leave it open so Driver and Leica can hear as much as possible. Then step a determined step back into the death-filled space station I fought so hard to escape. Zola is nowhere to be seen.
Canteen,
I hear him call from the direction of its entrance. I turn to Carlo. He looks understandably terrified. Keep him talking, and just try to keep calm. I tell him, "You've got this. We'll contain Zola, then get your boys to Earth, where they can be safe with everyone else. Are you with me?" He gulps heavily and starts walking. I stick right behind him and head for the canteen. Chapter 57. I walk right behind Carlo as we cross the Beacon Central area north to south to reach the canteen. The air is very cold, even out here. I turned the canteen into a cool box to preserve the bodies of my late colleagues as best as I could until a salvage mission could occur. And I don't know what kind of message Zola is trying to send, calling us here of all places. When the entrance comes into view, though, I see that the lines of corpses are gone. There's no sign of Zola yet either, but this is where he wants us. For now, at least, I have to do what he wants. Picking my moment to strike requires getting through the initial meeting, and he has to think he's in charge. He has to think he has the upper hand.
"Come in,"
Zola calls. Okay, he's definitely in there. After a few more steps, I see him. He's sitting off to the back right at the chess table.
"Come,"
He orders.
both of you, and keep your hands where I can see them, Ray. I still don't think you're that stupid, but just to be sure.
It takes a colossal effort to control my breathing and not react in any of the million ways my body wants to. But I know Driver was right. The most important thing here is to keep anger from getting the better of me. I walk with my palms up, glancing around the room as I go. All of the corpses are gone. It's cold, but not freezing, and the air feels a lot fresher, or at least less tainted than I would have expected.
And sit.
Zola says. He points Carlo to one seat and me to the next, both opposite his own. He moves a black bishop on the chessboard, then turns it around and moves a white pawn after a few seconds of thought. All of this is done with his right hand. In his left, he holds the detonator with his thumb over the red button. I'm already looking for a way to grab it, but his grip is tight. Our table is so far from the canteen's entrance, let alone the airlock, it seems impossible Driver is going to hear anything. I think she'll wait a few minutes before stepping out, as quietly as possible, and heading for the control room. What she might be able to do on the system is uncertain as what I might be able to do here. For now, the ball is in Zola's court.
The trouble with playing against yourself is the predictability.
Zola muses, finally looking up at me from his board.
That's the one thing I've enjoyed about you, Ray. You're just full of surprises.
I say nothing.
I didn't think you would actually bring Carlo, let alone romantics about things. But that's just it. Sometimes
I might be able to do here. For now, the ball is in Zola's court.
the trouble with playing against yourself is the predictability of it all.
Zola muses, finally looking up at me from his board.
That's the one thing I've enjoyed about you, Ray. You're just full of surprises.
I say nothing.
I didn't think you would actually bring Carlo to me, let alone the mantis of all things. But that's just it. Sometimes I've underestimated you, like with that. Then at other times I've overestimated you, like with New Zealand. How could you think it was safe? It's my facility, Ray. It would be like thinking I don't have this place rigged to blow at the snap of my fingers.
Where are the bodies? I eventually ask. It's an obvious question, which shouldn't raise any alarm bells, and seems like a good way to keep him talking. Part of me doesn't really want to know what he's done with them, but I'm still not giving up on the vow I made to get them home for a proper send-off if it's at all possible.
With the animals,
Zola replies, surprisingly direct.
in one of the only 2 offshoot labs whose sealed doors you haven't destroyed. I wasn't going to put them in yours. It's too dear to my heart. It's where you did the work that convinced me so much is possible.
I don't reply, hoping he'll keep talking. If I keep asking questions, where, why, how, he might realize I'm buying time. I also make a conscious effort not to show him he's getting to me, with the jibe about the role my research played in bringing us to this moment.
This was such a wasted space, so cold and tainted, he goes on. It was the same with the dorms. They're empty now. Of course, I used our helpful robot much more efficiently than you did. You were like a child with a toy, guiding it around. My autonomy chip let the Rovex perform the given task all on its own. Cleared out the dorms, too.
The thought of a robot as physically powerful as old Bex, running around with an autonomy chip, made me shiver when it was only hypothetical. Now I feel the fear even more strongly. So you put all of the bodies together. Because you care, I say, almost choking on the words. I know you do. And it doesn't have to go like this, Zola. Even now, you always have a choice. I know about the Institute. I know why you want to take those boys to the New World. I know you think Earth and society have held humanity back. Our world isn't perfect, and I know that too. But there is goodness in it. There are people like Carlo. There are more boys like Valerio.
You know nothing,
He replies curtly. But his expression changes. I'm not crazy enough to think anything I say is really going to get through, but he's mentally engaging with it. It's breaking his frame. I know about your father, I insist. Do you know about my stepfather? My brother? Bad things happen and bad people exist, Zola. But with every decision you make, you choose whether you're going to add to that or stand against it. Ask yourself if your father would press that button. Then ask yourself if Valerio would press it. His lips tighten. It takes all my mental strength not to glance down at the detonator again to see how close his thumb is to the button. I can't make it obvious, but I can't pick my moment if I don't know.
How has this man treated you, Carlo?
Zola asks. I take my momentary chance to flick my eyes down as he looks at Carlo. His thumb is as close as ever. I sigh.
Kindly,
The old man says.
he has told me many things, Nacho. Some I could not believe, but some I have seen for myself. The drill, the threats. I do not understand.
Zola's expression stiffens.
What I don't understand is why you didn't evacuate in the Balena,
He replies.
All of this could have been avoided, Carlo. I know you are going to tell me you didn't want to leave the others behind once they arrived in the bunker, but the chain of command exists for a reason. You helped the boys to board and then left them. I am disappointed. But what's done is done.
Zola interrupts.
We will talk later. For now, I have things to discuss with Ray which you do not need to hear. Take yourself next door, Carlo, to the greenhouse. I will join you once this man has finished apologizing for the problems he has brought to our door.
As Carlo stands up, I can't help but feel like the one piece of leverage I had has slipped away. I can only hope Driver is making progress, and that Carlo keeps his wits about him. After all, his pockets aren't empty. All I can do in the meantime is try to keep Zola talking and keep his finger off that button.
Wait,
He calls.
Carlo. Yes?
Carlo asks. Zola stares at him very deliberately for several seconds. When I follow his eyes, my heart sinks. My heart sinks because I know what he's looking at. It wasn't obvious until now, but from this angle, there is a small but noticeable bulge on the outside of Carlo's upper thigh.
Empty your pockets.
Zola demands, his tone much harsher than any he's used with Carlo so far. Carlo looks at me with a concerned expression on his face, which is the flat-out worst thing he could have done. If it wasn't obvious that we were up to something before, it sure as hell must be now.
Bring it to me,
Zola demands, tapping the table with his empty hand. Carlo glumly walks over, unzips his pocket, and places the small explosive device on the table. Zola stares at it, breathing slowly, but never relaxes his grip on the detonator.
Trust is like a balloon, Carlo,
He rasps, eventually looking up at him.
You can only pop it once.
He forced me.
Carlo yelps.
Nacho, I didn't do anything. He forced me to lie and to...
Zola silences him with a hard thump on the table. Carlo is very much entered self-preservation mode, but I'm glad his frightened instinct was to shout, "He forced me," rather than "they forced me."
Sit.
Zola orders him.
No, not here. One of the tables nearer the door.
When Carlo reaches a seat, Zola decides is far enough away, but to my mind clearly still in earshot. He sits down.
Don't move, Ray,
Zola demands, very coldly even by his own standards. But the next 4 words he booms into the air show a coldness I could never have imagined.
Defense. Eliminate unauthorized personnel.
As my head shoots around towards Carlo, the emergency hazard perception feature of my contact lenses kicks in for the first time. A yellow warning symbol flashes twice in the center of my vision. I don't know if my naked eyes would be able to see what I spot next, but my lenses certainly do. 4 directed laser beams, one originating from each corner of the ceiling and all focusing on Carlo. The lasers lock in, settling on his head. The fact he stayed so still and hasn't reacted directly to the moving beams while looking naturally confused and terrified tells me that he probably can't see the lasers. I only know because the lenses have kicked in and given me a brief warning. Not that there's anything I can do about it, and not that the warning makes witnessing this any easier. In an instant, Carlo's head jerks violently upward, and his lifeless body crumples to the floor.
He's dead. Like a balloon.
Zola hisses. I slowly force my gaze back around to face him.
I cared about Carlo,
He goes on, making a show of waving the detonator in front of me.
So tell me, Ray, what do you think I'm going to do to you?
Chapter 58. After his brutal demonstration of ruthlessness, Zola makes a show once again of holding the detonator in the air and slowly turning it in front of me. He then pulls a metallic-looking tab out of its rear side, almost like the plastic tabs I've pulled from countless battery-powered toys to activate them for Joe over the years. When he shows me the front again, I see a red number 5, then a 4, 3. Zola presses the button with a smile on his face, causing the number to fade away altogether.
What we have now is an inverted trigger, Ray.
He gleefully tells me.
If I stop pressing this button, the bombs in New Zealand will blow the bunker to Kingdom Come. Your family made it inside after my little drone scare, incidentally. I could show you the footage of them leaving the plane, if you like.
I stare at him, shaking with rage and fear and other feelings I can't even put into words. If it wasn't bad enough having to watch Carlo die, feeling guilt for giving him the explosive, and fear upon learning that the canteen and maybe the rest of the station is laced with laser-based weaponry, I can now no longer even hope to knock the detonator to safety and restrain Zola before he can grab it again, not without triggering it, thanks to Zola's devious inversion of how it works.
Using the only frequency that can get through my signal blocks, this device is directly linked to the explosives.
He goes on.
Nothing you or anyone else can do to my station will save them now. Let off as many of those explosives as you want. You can't save your family by sacrificing yourself. Your runaway friends on the Vita can't save them by taking me out. You're playing by my rules now, Ray, and you're going to do what I say.
What do you even want from me? I spit out. He purses his lips.
Good. A good question for once. And the answer is simple. I need you to tell the Vita to return to Earth and stand down, decisively clearing a path for my rendezvous with the balena. Holding their distance is no longer enough.
And then what? I push. You don't have enough theosite to make it to Basin, not even close. He shrugs.
I'll worry about that. Well, the survivors on Earth will too, since I'll be revisiting Site B, but let's focus on one thing at a time, shall we? You're going to walk with me to the control center, and we're going to call the Vita.
You expect me to believe you won't blow up the bunker anyway? I say. And even if you don't, you're saying you'll go back for the theosite at Site B? What is it you think you're bargaining here? He holds the detonator at arm's length and releases his thumb from the button. The number 5 appears again. 4, 3. Okay, I relent. I'll do it. He stops the countdown. I feel sick. Even doing what he wants is going to give me no way out of this in the short or long term. But all I can do is what we've been doing all along. Whatever it takes to stay in the fight. What happens later only matters if we survive right now. I follow Zola's lead in standing up, then follow his order to walk ahead. We reach the door. I don't even know if Driver is still in the Mantis or the control center, let alone whether she has succeeded or failed to get into the system. I also don't know if she's heard any of what's happened in the canteen, since Carlo's death, gruesome as it was all but silent. But as soon as we turn towards the control center and take our first few steps, another sound fills the air from behind me.
Squawk! Nacho?
I turn to look at Laika, but see Zola's face first. He looks confused, but not angry. His thumb remains pressed on the button.
Gio, my boy,
He says.
you're alive.
Gio, Miss Nacho.
Laika replies. He's Gio to Zola, as I already knew.
Nacho, okay?
Zola gestures with his hand.
Go and wait outside Leroy's room for now, Gio. I have to take care of something.
I look at Laika, counting on him like never before and hoping Driver put him up to this. He toddles off towards the greenhouse, but stops as soon as Zola turns around.
Why did you bring him back?
Zola asks. Before I have to think of a reply, Laika cuts in with a much louder call than usual.
Ray, hand!
He then flies towards me like a bullet before tilting rapidly into Zola's face at the last moment, just as the madman turns around to see.
Gio!
Zola roars, flailing with one hand and then the other as the powerful macaw claws and pecks at his cheeks and eyes. I grab for the detonator before it hits the ground, avoid the risk of it disastrously breaking, and then push my finger firmly onto the button. It only got to 3, and the numbers disappear as I press down. Driver! I yell. I have it! Help me restrain him! I hear Laika squawk in discomfort as Zola gets hold of him. With the detonator in my left hand, I swing a thumping right into Zola's midsection. He doubles over, allowing Laika to fly to freedom. Are you okay, buddy? I ask him. He focuses only on Zola, staring for a moment before flying back at him for more.
Nacho, kill Leroy!
He squawks with a rage I've never heard. I see Driver at the other end of the long corridor, emerging from the control center. Laika, go to Luna, I tell him. I mean it. Now. He stops, understandably.